In an unpredictable world, you can't simply wait for change to happen. We created McKinsey Live for leaders like you. Our global experts break down the need to know on the issues that matter most to decision makers and to society. We'll introduce you to leading research, new and transformational ideas, and practical knowledge and strategies, all to empower the changemakers of today, enabling you to step forward boldly, tackle real challenges, and drive change with clarity and purpose. We're helping you take control so you can drive the conversation, so you can lead fearlessly while leaving no one behind, so you can take the reins to create and accelerate growth, so you can build resilience for the future. Together, we can push towards the opportunities of our era. Let's get started now.
Hello and welcome to McKinsey Live. I'm Lucia Rahilly, McKinsey's editorial director, and your host for today's event, Agentic AI and the Future of Travel, What Executives Need to Know. Before we start, quick heads up that our goal with this series of live events is to give you a chance to engage with our experts on our latest research. Obviously, asking questions is a big part of that, so if you're registered for this event, please do not hesitate to use the Q&A functionality within your live stream. I will caveat we have a large group in the audience today, which is good, but we will take your questions throughout the session and answer as many as time allows when we close. Today, I'm joined by two top leaders of McKinsey's work in the travel sector. Kelly Ungerman is global co-leader of our travel logistics and infrastructure practice. She advises clients on integrating new digital and analytical tools, developing growth plans, and navigating complex fiscal, social, and environmental changes to help companies build resilience for the future. Kelly is based in Dallas, Texas. And Jules Seeley is based in Boston. He's also a leader of our travel and hospitality work. He works with a range of clients, airlines, hotels, automotives, cruise lines, and travel technology, advising on large-scale performance transformations across ops, commercial, digital analytics, organization, and strategy. Kelly and Jules, welcome to McKinsey Live.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thanks so much for making the time to be together with us today. So in our October McKinsey Live last month, we talked about what it takes to drive enterprise-wide transformation using Agentic AI to generate meaningful value at scale. Today we're going to home in on the opportunity for travel in particular, but before we do, it would be great to get just a brief level set of how AI is changing the broad operating environment for companies today. Kelly, could we start with you for that? Kelly, I think you're muted. Apologies, I can't hear you. No, we can't hear you.
Is that any better?
That's perfect.
Okay, sorry about that. All right. Okay, let's we'll jump in. But I think Lucia, it's a great place to start, and we will start a bit upper funnel in the early part of travel journeys. And you know, the reality is Gen AI is sort of breaking the tyranny of the search box, and in many ways, it's actually becoming the new front door of the internet. It's having huge impact already on kind of downstream search behavior, and already is having a lot of implications for websites. If we just step back for a moment, there's three primary types of Gen AI search before we launch into the impact of it. There's what we call embedded AI search. So think of this as Google Overview that does the summaries of the search listings below that. There's Gen AI chatbot search, so ChatGPT, which many of you are using, Perplexity are other examples. And then there's embedded and app search. So think of Microsoft Copilot or Google Workplace or a Shopify Sidekick. So with that as the context, we're already seeing a pretty significant decline in web traffic year to date. These are June numbers, so these numbers may be even more depressed now. But year to date, we're showing a 15% decline in web traffic. And this is especially true for sites that really focus on just common search queries. Think of news sites. So 70% of news-related searches are zero-click. And that's effectively because AI is skipping the source and reducing the overall clicks. In many cases, it's going from a list of links to answers or a curated set of travel options, maybe even in some cases a fully personalized travel itinerary. Lots of fewer questions are being answered, being asked on message boards. And then we're also seeing a decline in user contributions to sites like Wikipedia. So the net impact of that is both risk and in some cases opportunities or an imperative. On the risk side, I think the question is, how do you make sure that your site doesn't become just a content warehouse where AIs are going to scrape it for their own results? And I think on the opportunity side, for many companies, and many have already started to evolve from a world of SEO to GEO, meaning generative engine optimization. So click-through rates are no longer king, just as sort of the headline. And it's really important to start thinking about how do you optimize your content to be scraped and picked up by the AI engines? How do you make it more dynamic, more conversational? How do you make sure that there is clear trust with the consumers? And there's a lot of ways, not just the brand, but also the cues of that content. And then finally, just the path to monetization is different. And how do you think about starting to make sure that you are unlocking some of those opportunities, whether it's servicing ads within the Gemini experience as one example.
Super helpful. And folks who want more there can visit research on our website, mckinsey.com. Against this broad backdrop, Kelly, where does the travel industry in particular stand today?
Sure, I'll talk about it from two perspectives, both the consumers, which is a lot of the stats that you see here, but also kind of writ large, what are we seeing based on some research that we did earlier this year with Skift. As you can see from the numbers and from your own personal experiences, consumers are using AI for travel planning. Jules will get into more of where are they using, how much, and where do we see that going across the entire journey. And probably unsurprisingly, social media is still far and away the most important source of inspiration for travel inspiration and travel planning. So I think that's the consumer side. On the broader industry, the research that we did with Skift showed a few things. One is about a third of executives that we surveyed are reporting experimenting with agentic AI. So not just analytical AI or Gen AI, but actually using agents in different parts of the business. About 30% are starting to experiment and scale in one part of their business. So think pricing, revenue management, or call centers, or service recovery if you're an airline. But 40% are saying, hey, we're not quite there yet. We're not yet using agentic. And if you're in this camp, you're still in good company. And remember, it's only been since 22 and 23 that Gen AI became mainstream, and really only in the last year or so that agentic started becoming more popular. And then if you look at it across the value chain in terms of how companies are using it, on the supplier and brand side, we're seeing more focus on things like process optimization. So, front desk tools, as an example, are using guest room allocation. But we're not yet seeing the full, end-to-end reimagination of an entire part of the business. And that's where we see real economic unlock. OTAs, as you all know, are leaning into this, but we would say the experiences are still probably more AI powered versus AI first. And I think there's a question of, again, how far into the journey consumers will allow you to go. And then, there's a whole bucket of startups and incumbents that have invested meaningfully in AI-assisted travel trip planning. Many of those are now, frankly, unfunded. And if you kind of dig underneath the surface, as to why, there's a few reasons, right? One is, many of them are skipping the dreaming and the research. So it turns out consumers actually still care about like inspiration in the travel journey. Many of them haven't yet built because they're so nascent, that focus on kind of trust that is so important in this equation. And then many of them just lack the content, and the premium on experiences and personalization is still quite high. So all that to say, as you step back from this, begs the questions of, how are travelers really going to prefer to search in the future? How will they book in the future? And then, at the core of it, how do you really start to build some of that underlying trust?
Okay, super interesting. Let's talk traveler back then in a little more detail. And Jules, I would love to bring you in here. Like many of us, as Kelly was just describing, I actually know folks who've started to use LLMs to book their personal travel. But of course, other consumers may be wary. And as Kelly was saying, presumably Agentic also ups the ante there. Where are consumers now using AI to navigate the travel landscape in this question of trust?
Yeah, it's a great question, Lucia. And I think travelers, as Kelly says, we're seeing significant adoption of travelers using AI tools and capabilities. And trip planning is a great example where well over half of travelers are now using some form of trip planning, either through a large language model or on their preferred travel site. And so they're getting travel inspiration and exploration in that. Trust is an important element of it, but the customer does seem open to it. And being thoughtfully positioned customer first as assistance to the customer rather than trying to sell them something. I think that general direction of information, insight, how do I digest thousands of reviews? How do I understand different opportunities on a trip, experiences I could take, and ideally personalized a bit more to somebody like me. And so rather than saying this is, the best hotel, question is what might be one that is a fit with my personality or interest or style. And so the more that they're able to lean into that personalization and digest information and serve it up in a insightful way to customers, we see a lot of value in that. What is interesting, though, is these large language models do command significant influence over customer behavior and preference. And I was with one of the leading travel companies last week, and we were looking at how ChatGPT viewed their brand versus some of their leading competitors. And it was interesting to see. It was very stark because it gave a balanced view and insights on their own brand. It gave insights on the competitor brand, and it felt like quite a good fit in what they might perceive in the market. But then it went on to say, unprompted, on balance, it would lean to the competitor's brand. And that was quite a surprise to the exec team, who were suddenly looking at this advisory navigation through ChatGPT and getting something that was steering customers away from them. And look, we could debate, was it right, was it wrong? But in some senses, that's not the point, because with 800 million weekly active users, that's a huge amount of influence in how customers are perceiving a brand, an operator, an experience, a destination. And so I think for anybody working in consumer travel, looking at how the LLMs view their brand, view the competitors, are they structuring their data and messages, their brand in an effective way, and positioning it so that the large language models can actually decipher that and essentially help the LLMs, help their customers navigate to what matters in their brand. And so I think that search piece, we already see a ton of momentum in. The booking piece that Kelly was referencing, I think that's the really interesting place, because that's the heart of Agentic. And right now, while travelers trust the research, like getting insight, they still, for the vast majority, want control of the travel booking process. So I would say for agentic booking in travel, it's very early days. But we do expect to see significant shifts there, because there's so much friction in the current travel booking experience. And so we already see for corporate trip planning, for relatively straightforward, repeatable corporate trips, we see a whole set of websites or apps, Slack interfaces and others that already enable agentic booking directly today for corporate travel. And we've seen in a number of companies pretty significant uptick in that already. also helps with compliance with their travel policies, takes out a lot of administrative cost. And so that seems to be a significant shift already we expect to see more of. On the consumer side, I think we would say a slower ramp up. And we would imagine we'll see more agentic transactions in retail first. So $20, $30 retail purchases that are refundable and returnable seems like an easy place for customers to start. And we see some experimentation with the LLMs on that already. But we would imagine relatively quickly more straightforward consumer travel pieces will see adoption as well. So, perhaps a rental car for a night or two where you want a standard car, the city, the airport you're landing in. Maybe airlines after not too long as well, because there are relatively fewer options between two destination cities. Whereas we imagine hotels might take a bit longer as there's a lot more breadth, a lot more choice, and a lot more variables that go into the customer. And so how that gets personalized, I think, will take some more time.
Interesting. Thanks, Jules. And maybe let's bring to life a little bit more what AI-enabled search and book might look like. In other words, how do we expect AI to play out in the travel ecosystem in a little more detail?
Yeah, this is a great question, Lucia. And this is one we would start by saying we certainly don't claim to have the answers to this question. I mean, the evolution of the ecosystem is super complicated, and there's many different elements moving around. And so it's definitely hard to say we see definitively where it's going. Excuse me. So what we've been doing with a number of boards and executive teams and investors is exploring a set of scenarios to look at what could happen and what might influence those different directions. And so we have 4 scenarios here that we think are quite helpful to illustrate the potential outcomes. So starting on the left here with what we call co-pilot commerce. So this is essentially AI assistance. It's the sort of co-pilot model. AI becomes embedded into many of the existing structures. So you go to your favorite airline, you use AI to help you through the journey. You go to your favorite hotel, AI helps you through the journey. Same with an OTA. And under that scenario, we would imagine less of a structural shift in the ecosystem, significant customer benefit, significant reduction of friction, improvement in the travel research and booking process, but run through many of the existing entities and organizations that run today. And so that's closer to a status quo model. Secondly, we could see much more AI experience curation. So this is AI essentially helping a customer put together the whole of their trip and navigate across the market. And that likely needs significant personalized data. So it would need vertical depth in the travel space, but also horizontal data to really understand a customer's preference and interest. And so given the complexity of aggregating in the travel space, we'd imagine that's a world where the OTAs might play a bigger role because they see across multiple modes and they can integrate together trips. And so we might in that world see a bit of a shift towards OTA or intermediation of some form, and perhaps away then from the suppliers as the direct interface. The third scenario would look the other way and say, is there a world where if the supplier has the best insights on the product, the service, they can show up well, they can help a customer through agentic capabilities really understand their products and services and make choices? Does that mean the customer channels into that supplier more quickly and engages through that supplier with the real vertical depth of expertise around their product and service? And so you could, in that world, imagine you get channeling of an increase in direct to suppliers and perhaps then less through intermediaries, and agents, again, doing some work to reduce the friction in that. And then the fourth scenario, and this is the one that sounds a bit like a science fiction novel, the sort of agents take over. And in this one, could imagine a world where you as an individual traveler have a personal AI agent that's helping you do your travel research and booking. The suppliers and OTAs also have their own AI agents helping them put together the options. And so you could imagine a world where you get agent-to-agent interaction. And so you're instructing your agent what to do. It's then essentially going out and negotiating and exploring with all these other agents in a very efficient and fast way across the whole market and putting together the trip or the experience that you're looking for. And in that world, we'd imagine the large language models play a very large part because of the depth of data they have. Maybe credit card and other platform players increasingly play a role there as well. A little bit less clear what it means for the OTAs and suppliers. And so we can see under each of these scenarios, we see quite different outcomes for where you sit in the value chain. Hard to say which one we're going down, but certainly suggests that active participation and trying to engage with the customer and experiment right now is a great direction to move in.
So cool. Okay, so both of you are obviously talking to clients every day. You said it's early days, but do you see any interesting early examples of travel players moving on these opportunities or value creation in action? Kelly?
We do, although, I think as Jules and I talk about this and serve our clients, there's also the reality that, almost everyone is experimenting in some form. Very few are saying, hey, I've actually seen all of that value flow through to the P&L. We like to say AI is everywhere except in the P&L. And some of that is a function of the technology. We think there is an interesting inflection point as you move from Gen AI to agentic, where by definition, agentic is more autonomous. It is acting independently. And so we think the full potential of agentic is quite exciting, but we're not there yet. And I think there's two sides of the coin in this industry. On the one hand, this industry is, uniquely suited for agentic AI. At the same time, there's also a lot of challenges. As you all know, we still have a lot of legacy systems. There's a lot of siloed data, siloed, frankly, functions within the organization. And unsurprisingly, given the hospitality nature of it, we've relied on human interaction to really make this industry special. And so, again, presents both an opportunity and a challenge. We like to think about the distinction between horizontal and vertical domains and use cases. Horizontal meaning something that cuts across the entire organization. So think of a Microsoft Copilot or something that assists with insights, analytics, and knowledge management. And those are great because it's a great way for everyone in the organization to learn the craft of AI and kind of get their hands dirty. But we don't tend to see huge value from the horizontal use cases. Instead, we are seeing more value from what we call the verticals. But not just automating the same part of the business, but actually fundamentally rewiring and reimagine what it could look like before you automate it. And as you can see from this page, there's a whole range of parts of the company that companies are looking at. Some are front of house, some are back of house, some are more revenue leaning, some are more cost leaning, and then some go all the way to the front line. There's a couple examples that I think we get excited about. One, is automating guest room allocation. So, think about connecting your customer data platform and having agents that can go in and automatically, execute room assignments based on your preferences, your feedback from your past stays, your loyalty tiers. So for us, we're a family of four. We typically like 2 joining rooms away from the elevator. That's my husband's preference. And great views if there's an ocean or a mountain. So how do you take all that into account and frankly have the agent do it for the front office, freeing up in our experience a couple hours a day and allowing them to do higher value things or frankly just engage more meaningfully with the guests. So that is one part of the business that we get excited about. Housekeeping is another. If you think about, the ability to take staffing levels combined with guest schedules, computer vision technology of rooms, so you can see if somebody left it really clean or really dirty. It allows you to sort of automate the tasks and the workflows so that your the staff is efficiently cleaning the rooms on time, and it that's a bit of a win-win, right? You're saving housekeeping time, but you're also allowing guests to check in on time. So that's something that we get excited about. We think there's somewhere between a 10 to 30% impact on hours. And then maybe if you go to the revenue side of the equation, I love this notion of not just dynamic pricing, but dynamic bundling. And I would say this is something the industry has been moving on for some time, but not just sort of next product to buy, very transactional, but actually constructing fit for purpose bundles. If you're an airline, what's the right combination of ancillaries around check bags, extra legroom, upgrades, right? If you're flying for personal day passes to clubs, and how do you start to construct those bundles for different segments? If you're a hotel, having more experience-driven packages, it could be wellness weekends, or could be the Taylor Swift VIP weekend. So, as you can see, lots of possibility here that we get excited about, and we think done at scale will have real P&L impact.
Interesting. Okay, and one of the issues we seem to hear again and again, and you alluded to this, Kelly, is the challenge of acting at any kind of scale when the tech is just so fast moving. So, building the plane and flying it at the same time, as the cliche goes. Jules, how should travel leaders manage that tension between the obvious need for experimentation where AI is concerned and the risk of what we sometimes call death by 1,000 pilots, investment and capacity that's too thinly spread across too many AI initiatives?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's something our clients are grappling with in the travel space and much more broadly. And so I think there's some good lessons actually across all industries. And as we look at the companies that are most effective at harnessing AI across industries, and then looking in the travel space as well, we do think there's a more structured approach to how to think about deploying effectively. And that's not to say, Lucia, that experimentation is a bad thing. We actually think experimentation is great and good to just participate and play broadly. But there's a couple of principles that we've seen been very effective. Firstly, that the CEO and the executive team really have AI high up on the agenda and get deep in it themselves. And so immerse in it, use it themselves, really live the AI experience, because that helps the organization to navigate. Secondly, we do think that keeping really focused on a few select domains that will drive strategic differentiation for your company. So there are so many places you could choose to deploy AI, and certainly fine to experiment with many of those. But what are the select few that are going to drive a strategic edge for your own company? What makes you excellent and special and is going to differentiate you in the market? And how do you focus AI in those areas? And then, as Kelly was referencing early on, how do you choose those domains and then really rewire is the language we use? So rethink the entire domain end to end. And I think our critique of much of today's AI experimentation is it's some great AI pieces in an existing journey. And so it improves this bit of the journey or this bit or this bit, but it doesn't step back and say, do I even need this overall journey in its form today? Or could I reinvent that to be fundamentally different? And for that, you have to have a view of the end state as well. So, travel search and booking, if we think that's going to become heavily voice intermediated in a conversation, bringing me a list of 25 hotels isn't helpful, because I'm going to sit there for a long time while it reads out the list of 25 hotels. Whereas if I think it's going to be on an app or a visual experience, maybe I can make that narrow down from 1,000 to 25 be helpful. So you have to have a view on where the industry or where your function is going, and then say, how do I fundamentally rethink what technology can do for that function? And on the page here, you'll see the 6 elements that we see as part of that structured approach. Firstly, the strategic roadmap. So being very clear on what are those specific areas where you see value in your business. There's then a set of elements in the middle where we think the talent and capabilities that are required to drive AI successfully are quite different. The operating model, agile technology, given the pace of change of technology, even what you could do 6 months ago versus now is very different. So how to have an operating model that is rapid and agile to deploy this. How to have a technology stack that's modernized and able to talk with many different players in that space. And then how to make sure your own data and information is in a usable form so you can quickly pull it in. And so those 4 are the core content enablers: the talent, the op model, the technology, and the data. And then underneath that, how to then drive adoption. And one of our interesting observations is companies are spending a lot on technology in the travel space and elsewhere, and on AI. But we see a real multiple of what's needed to spend on the change management to actually embed it. And we don't think technology is the rate limiter here at all. We think the change management of how to embed that capability effectively into the business is really what's required, and that could be significantly heavier lift than the technology investment. And so we see this structured approach, and working with a number of companies now deploying this to really put some accelerant around how to deploy AI effectively.
Thank you, Jules. Okay, I'm mindful of time. I want to try to squeeze in one question. We've had, not unexpectedly, several questions on the second the second on this slide, talent, upskill, upskill, upskill. It's on AI fluency. What kinds of skills do we expect to be critical as we move into this new era? And does that upskilling look different for leaders in the space, for executives? Kelly, do you want to take that quickly?
Yeah, happy to. I think it's a great question. And I think one that we're probably not talking enough about. I think Jules and I would say in our work, the talent and operating model and culture are in many ways the toughest part of this. And, we think is an important unlock. The technology is tough, but solvable. The strategy, if you can get your top team aligned, is also very solvable. The talent questions are trickier. And while we haven't yet seen these sort of, the prediction of mass unemployment, there's clearly the tech sector, you're starting to see a bit of a bellwether. I think if you scratch under the surface, though, we're seeing jobs and talent transform in a few ways. In our experience, there's sort of three broad shifts. Some of those roles actually will be replaced by agents, just full stop. So think of roles like contract processing reps or RFP prep specialists, web developers. There's lots of examples where software can be done just as effectively entirely by agents as developers. And so these roles in many ways may be going away. And I think the imperative is to say, how can you reskill those folks for adjacent roles? So that's kind of bucket one. Bucket two is other roles will be fundamentally reshaped. And we are seeing the rise and importance of integrators and orchestrators that are integrating between humans and agents. So examples could be software engineers or account executives, digital marketers, product managers. So think about a product manager that's leading a pod with half humans and half agents, or ultimately almost entirely agents. I have one client that said we're going to stop talking about two pizza teams. It's a one pizza team or a no pizza team. And then, there are going to be net new roles that emerge. The reality is the topic of risk and trust and safety are real ones. And, companies are building that muscle with new roles. So that's, examples of sort of net new roles that we see. But, a little bit of a mix shift, if you will, and frankly, a real need to start upskilling across the board.
Okay, we are at time. This was such a fantastic discussion. Kelly and Jules, thanks again for joining us today.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lucia.
And as always, many thanks to all of you in our McKinsey Live audience. You can find a replay of this and all previous McKinsey Live events on our website, mckinsey.com/live. And please join us in the run-up to CES in December. We're going to have a super interesting discussion about the future of robotics and also autonomous vehicles. You can scan the QR code you see on the screen right now to register. Have a great day or evening and see you there. Be well.